It happened to your neighbor's husband. You remember the morning, the ambulance in the driveway before 7, the paramedics moving with a speed that told you everything before anyone said a word. He had gone to bed fine, no complaints, no warning, just a normal Tuesday night. And the part that stayed with you, the part you never quite let go of, is that nobody ever explained why. Nobody sat down and said, here is what happened inside his body while he was sleeping. Here is the chain of events. Here is what could have changed it. I am going to give you that explanation today. And I am going to count down 7 specific nighttime habits that research consistently links to elevated cardiovascular risk during sleep, from least to most dangerous. Number 1 is the most underestimated risk in cardiovascular medicine, and it is almost certainly something your doctor has never measured. Stay all the way through, because that last one changes everything about how you understand your own numbers. This is going to take time. You deserve more than a surface-level list. Let us go through it together. Let me describe something to you, and I want you to answer honestly, even if only to yourself. You wake at 3 in the morning. No alarm, no obvious reason. Just awake, suddenly in the dark, with your heart beating in a way that feels slightly louder than it should. Maybe faster. Maybe just present, in a way that hearts are not supposed to feel present when you are lying still in your own bed. You lie there for a moment, waiting for it to settle. It does. You tell yourself it was a dream. You tell yourself it was nothing. You go back to sleep, or you wake with a headache that is already there before you have opened your eyes. A dull pressure across the forehead, the kind that coffee does not fully clear, the kind that has been happening more mornings than you would like to count. You have attributed it to sleep quality, to stress, to the position you were lying in. You have accepted it as part of getting older. Or you wake up more tired than when you went to bed. You slept 7 or 8 hours. You know you did. But the tiredness that greets you in the morning is not the soft tiredness of someone who rested. It is a heavier thing, a weariness that was already there, the kind that makes you wonder, quietly, if something is working harder than it should be while you are asleep. These are not random. They are not simply the indignities of age. They are signals, specific, readable signals, that something in your cardiovascular system is under more stress during the night than it should be. And most of the people who experience them have never been told what causes them. They have been told to sleep better, to reduce stress, to take their medication. But nobody has drawn the line from a specific habit in the hour before bed to a specific event in the body at 3 in the morning. That is what this video does. From tonight forward, those signals will mean something to you. And more importantly, you will know what to do about them. You are not imagining any of it, and it is not inevitable. Here is something I want you to hold in the back of your mind as we work through the 7 habits on this list. There is a specific window of time, not a moment, but a sustained period, during which the human heart faces its greatest physiological challenge of the entire 24-hour day. It is not the middle of a workout. It is not a stressful afternoon. It happens while you are lying in bed, appearing completely at rest, sometime between 4 and 10 in the morning. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what happens in that window, why it is so dangerous, and what the night before has to do with whether your heart enters that window in a protected state or a compromised one. That connection between what you do at 10 at night and what happens to your arteries at 6 in the morning is the thread that runs through everything we are going to cover today. Most people have never heard it explained. Most people have no idea the connection exists. And that gap in understanding is, in my view, one of the most consequential information failures in everyday cardiovascular health. My name is Dr. Jane Mitchell. I have spent more than 20 years in clinical practice focused on cardiovascular health. I have been in operating rooms at 2 in the morning, responding to heart attacks and strokes that began while someone was sleeping. I have had conversations with families in waiting rooms who had no idea anything was wrong. Their person went to bed fine. They had dinner. They watched television. They went to sleep, and they did not wake up. In the years since, I have spent a significant portion of my practice studying the research behind why these events happen when they do, specifically why they cluster so heavily in the overnight and early morning hours, and what specific behaviors consistently appear in the histories of people who experience them. The pattern is not random, it is identifiable, and the habits that create it are ordinary, common, and almost universally overlooked. What I am going to share with you today is built on that research and those years of clinical observation. It is not a fear exercise. My goal is not to frighten you. My goal is to give you the accurate, complete picture of what your cardiovascular system is doing while you sleep, what makes it vulnerable during that time, and exactly what 7 habits consistently push it toward a dangerous state, so that you can make informed decisions about the hours that matter most, because those hours matter more than most people realize, and you deserve to understand why. Before we dive in, if you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds right now, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video, and give this a thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people like you find this content. And drop a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our community is tuning in from around the world. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called The Glucose Paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Before I walk you through the 7 habits, I want to tell you about a man named Franklin. Franklin was 66 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, when he came to see me for a routine cardiovascular evaluation. He was not in crisis. He felt reasonably well. He had some fatigue that he attributed to retirement, some morning headaches that he attributed to sleeping badly, and blood pressure readings that were acceptable in the office, 128/82, but which had been gradually creeping upward over the past 3 years. Franklin was not dismissive of his health. He took his medication. He walked 3 times a week. He had cut back significantly on red meat. By most conventional measures, he was doing the responsible things. When I asked Franklin about his evenings, the picture that emerged was this. He typically ate dinner around 8, sometimes 8:30, because that was when his wife finished her book club on certain nights, and they liked to eat together. He usually had a glass of wine with dinner, sometimes 2. He watched television for an hour or so afterward, phone on the arm of the chair, and went to bed around 10:30 or 11. His bedroom ran warm because his wife preferred it that way. He slept with his phone on the nightstand because it served as his alarm. Nothing in that description would alarm most people. Nothing in it would alarm most doctors reviewing a patient history. It sounds like a reasonable evening. It sounds like a normal life. But here is what I want you to understand, and this is the clue that connects everything. Franklin's cardiovascular system was not experiencing a normal evening. It was experiencing 7 simultaneous stressors, all operating in the same overnight window, each one compounding the others. And his acceptable daytime blood pressure reading was hiding a nighttime profile that looked nothing like it. We will come back to Franklin, but I wanted you to have his face in mind as we go through the list, because his story is not unusual. It is typical. And the fact that it looked unremarkable is exactly why it mattered. We are starting at number 7 and working toward the most dangerous number 1. And number 7 is the one that surprises almost everyone because it has nothing to do with food, alcohol, medication, or any of the things most people associate with heart health. Number 7, sleeping with your phone in the bedroom. Now here is where it gets interesting, because the mechanism behind this risk is not what most people expect. The concern about phones and sleep is usually framed around keeping people awake. The light, the notifications, the temptation to scroll, those things are real. But the deeper cardiovascular risk involves something almost nobody talks about, a hormone called melatonin. Think of your cardiovascular system at night, like a town that needs to lower its drawbridge after sundown. The drawbridge is your blood pressure. It needs to come down significantly during the first hours of sleep, giving your arterial walls a window of reduced mechanical stress, allowing your heart to operate in a genuinely lower demand state. Melatonin is the signal that tells the bridge operator to lower the bridge. Without adequate melatonin, the drawbridge stays up, your blood pressure stays elevated through the night. And your arterial walls take the full stress of every hour that should have been a period of rest. Melatonin is produced by a small gland in your brain called the pineal gland, and it is extraordinarily sensitive to one specific thing: blue wavelength light, the exact wavelength emitted by every phone screen, tablet, computer monitor, and LED television currently in use. Research shows that 60 to 90 minutes of blue light exposure in the evening can suppress melatonin production for the first 3 to 4 hours of your sleep period. Not prevent sleep, you can fall asleep completely normally, but suppress the hormone that lowers your blood pressure, reduces your cortisol, and protects your arterial walls during the hours those protections are most needed. And there is a second mechanism. Your phone, even face down on the nightstand, even on silent, generates what sleep researchers call microarousals, brief partial awakenings triggered by vibrations, notification lights, sounds, or simply the subconscious awareness of the device. You will almost certainly never remember these awakenings. You will not feel them in any obvious way, but each one pulls you out of deeper sleep, triggers a brief cortisol and blood pressure spike, and over the course of a night, the cumulative cardiovascular load from dozens of these microarousals is genuinely significant. The solution is the only one that addresses both mechanisms fully. The phone leaves the bedroom, not face down on the nightstand, in another room, on Do Not Disturb. A basic alarm clock costs less than $10 and does the job without any of the cardiovascular risk. And ending all screen exposure, phone, television, tablet, at least 60 minutes before your intended sleep time gives your melatonin enough time to begin rising before you close your eyes, rather than being suppressed through the first hours of sleep. That is number 7, free, simple, and producing a measurable change in overnight blood pressure and arterial protection starting the very first night. Number 6, sleeping in a room that is too warm. Hold on, because this one changes the whole picture for a lot of people. We associate warmth with comfort, and comfort with good sleep. So the idea that a warm bedroom is hurting your heart sounds almost backward, but the physiology is unambiguous. Your core body temperature is programmed to drop during sleep. This is not incidental. It is a biological prerequisite for reaching the deeper, most restorative stages of sleep. As your core temperature falls, your heart rate slows, your blood pressure decreases, your metabolic rate drops, and your cardiovascular system enters what researchers describe as a genuinely low-demand state. The temperature drop is the trigger for all of it. Think of it like a factory that runs at full capacity during business hours. At night, the factory is supposed to power down most of its systems, reduce heat, reduce energy use, run on minimal operating demand, so that the equipment can cool and the maintenance crew can do their work. A warm bedroom is like leaving all the machinery running. The factory never powers down, the maintenance never happens, and every morning, the equipment starts the day without having had a true recovery period. When your bedroom is too warm, your body cannot accomplish the required temperature drop efficiently. Your blood vessels near the skin dilate, trying to radiate heat outward. Your heart rate stays elevated to support that heat dissipation process. You produce sweat, which means fluid loss, which means your blood becomes progressively more viscous as the night continues, and your sleep architecture shifts. You spend significantly less time in the deep, slow-wave sleep stages where cardiovascular recovery actually occurs, and more time in lighter stages that provide less restoration. Clinical research has directly connected warmer sleep environments to elevated nighttime blood pressure, reduced deep sleep duration, and higher morning cortisol levels, not in extreme temperatures. In the range most people sleep in regularly, the target range that consistently shows the best outcomes is between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than most people's default. You might be thinking, I already sleep with blankets. That handles the warmth. The mechanism is not about surface warmth. It is about the air temperature your skin can use to release body heat. Heavy blankets in a warm room trap heat against the body and prevent the skin's heat release from working. The right combination is a cool room around 65 degrees if possible, with light, breathable bedding made from natural fabrics like cotton or bamboo that allow airflow rather than blocking it. If you share a bed with a partner who prefers warmth, This conversation is worth having specifically in cardiovascular terms. The physiological case for a cooler room after 50 is not about preference. It is about the conditions under which your heart can actually recover while you sleep. That is number 6. Number 5. Going to bed dehydrated. Now here is the clue that most people miss entirely, and it connects more directly to the morning cortisol window than almost anything else on this list. After the age of 50, your body's thirst mechanism becomes progressively less reliable. It responds more slowly, signals less strongly, and is easier to misread as fatigue or hunger rather than thirst. Most people over 50 are in a state of mild chronic dehydration through much of the day, not dramatically dehydrated, not the kind that impairs obvious function, just quietly below optimal fluid levels. That mild deficit, carried into the overnight hours, creates a cardiovascular problem that works through 2 separate pathways simultaneously. Think of your blood like a river. In a well-hydrated state, the river runs full, blood flows easily, with relatively low resistance, through flexible arterial channels. When plasma volume drops from dehydration, the river narrows. The same red blood cells, clotting proteins, and inflammatory markers are now concentrated in a smaller volume of fluid. Blood is thicker, it moves with more resistance. Your heart works harder to push it. And the clotting factors, the proteins that seal wounds and form blood clots, are more concentrated and more reactive. In the early morning hours, when the cortisol surge is already activating those clotting systems, thicker blood with more concentrated clotting factors is a genuinely dangerous combination. The second pathway involves the kidneys. When your body detects low fluid levels, the kidneys release a hormone that signals sodium retention. Sodium retention causes the body to hold water to balance it, which increases blood volume and raises blood pressure through a direct volume mechanism that operates completely independently of the blood thickening effect. 2 separate pathways, both harmful, both running simultaneously through your overnight cardiovascular system. There is also a caffeine connection that most people get wrong. Coffee and tea count toward daily fluid intake, but only partially. Caffeine has a mild diuretic effect. It prompts the kidneys to excrete more fluid than they take in. 2 or 3 cups of coffee through the day without adequate plain water alongside can leave you genuinely behind on hydration by early evening, and that deficit is exactly what carries into the night. The practical solution is not drinking a large glass of water right at bedtime, which risks waking you for the bathroom. It is distributed hydration throughout the day, water with each meal, water between meals, a small glass roughly 60 to 90 minutes before bed. Not enough to disrupt sleep, but enough to ensure your blood plasma volume is where it needs to be when the overnight cardiovascular stress begins. If you regularly wake up with a dry mouth, that is your body's most accessible feedback signal. It means your evening hydration has been insufficient, and correcting it is genuinely one of the simplest changes on this entire list. That is number 5. Number 4, alcohol before bed. I want to approach this one with honesty rather than judgment, because I think most discussions of alcohol and sleep skip the part that actually matters. For many people over 50, a drink in the evening is one of the genuine small pleasures of the day. It marks the transition from obligation to rest. I understand that completely. I am not here to moralize about it. What I am here to do is explain what is actually happening inside your cardiovascular system in the hours after that drink, because it is significantly more specific and more consequential than most people realize. Your liver metabolizes alcohol at roughly 1 standard drink per hour. During that process, alcohol is converted into a compound called acetaldehyde, which has a stimulating effect on the nervous system. As acetaldehyde builds and then clears in the middle of the night, it generates what researchers call the alcohol rebound effect. Your brain, initially sedated by the alcohol, swings back toward alertness as the acetaldehyde clears. This is exactly why people who drink before bed often fall asleep easily, but wake between 2 and 4 in the morning, alert, unable to settle. Not coincidence. A pharmacological rebound with a predictable timing and mechanism, but the sleep disruption is only part of the cardiovascular story. Alcohol causes blood vessels to dilate initially, dropping blood pressure. Your heart senses reduced resistance and increases its output to compensate. Then, as the alcohol clears, blood vessels constrict and blood pressure rebounds, often above the pre-drinking baseline. That rebound hits in the middle of the night against arterial walls that are already stiffer after 50. During the hours when any existing arterial weakness is most exposed, alcohol is also a diuretic. It suppresses the hormone that tells the kidneys to conserve fluid, causing increased urine production overnight, and accelerating the blood thickening we discussed in number 5. And alcohol directly affects the heart's electrical conduction system. Even moderate consumption can provoke irregular heart rhythms, a phenomenon well documented in the literature as holiday heart syndrome, occurring even in people with no prior cardiac history. The practical intervention here is timing rather than elimination. 3 to 4 hours between your last drink and sleep allows the liver to largely process it, reduces the overnight rebound effect, and allows melatonin to function without suppression. Drinking with a 6 o'clock dinner and going to bed at 10 is physiologically workable. A final drink at 9:30 and sleep at 10:30 is a different cardiovascular picture, specifically a worse one, during the most vulnerable overnight hours. That is number 4. Number 3, eating a large heavy meal late in the evening. Now here is where it gets interesting, in a way that connects back to something you already know about blood sugar. Your body does not process food the same way at all hours. Your digestive efficiency, your insulin sensitivity, and your liver function are all regulated by your internal biological clock, the circadian system, that coordinates your body's processes with the cycle of day and night. During daylight hours, your metabolic machinery runs at its most efficient. Insulin is released in a timely, proportionate response. Blood sugar rises and comes back down cleanly. In the evening, and especially late evening, that efficiency declines. The same meal that your body handles smoothly at noon requires significantly more metabolic effort at 8 or 9 at night. Think of it like a highway maintenance crew that starts work at midnight. They are capable and equipped, but the road is their primary workspace during those hours, and traffic, meaning food arriving for digestion, creates complications. Insulin is slower and less effective. Blood sugar rises higher and stays elevated longer. Your liver, trying to perform its overnight maintenance and repair functions, also has to handle the incoming nutrient load simultaneously. The cardiovascular effects are specific and measurable. Blood pressure rises as circulation redirects toward the digestive system. Inflammatory signaling increases as part of the normal metabolic response to eating. And when you lie flat after a large meal, gravity no longer assists digestion. The stomach works harder, acid reflux risk increases sharply, and acid reflux is not merely uncomfortable. The vagus nerve runs alongside the esophagus and connects directly to the heart. Esophageal acid exposure can stimulate this nerve in ways that trigger irregular heart rhythms. People who experience nighttime heart pounding after a heavy dinner often have no idea the two events are connected. High-sodium meals compound everything. Most restaurant food, most takeout, most packaged and processed food contains sodium levels 2 to 4 times what a heart-protective dinner should. Sodium causes fluid retention overnight, raising blood pressure through a direct volume mechanism that persists through the night and into the morning cortisol surge. The practical target is 3 hours between finishing your main meal and going to bed. Lighter evening meals, lean protein, vegetables, moderate carbohydrates, low sodium, are processed cleanly and leave your heart in a genuinely quieter state by midnight. If your schedule forces late eating regularly, the two factors that carry the most overnight cardiovascular weight are sodium and fat load. Reducing those in the late meal, even without changing the timing, meaningfully reduces the overnight pressure on your cardiovascular system. That is number 3. I want to stop here and bring back the open question I raised at the beginning. I told you that there is a specific window of time during which your heart faces its greatest challenge of the 24-hour day. Not during exercise, not during stress, but while you appear to be completely at rest. By now you understand the overnight landscape, the blood pressure that should drop but may not, the cortisol that surges before dawn, the clotting factors that activate in the early morning hours, the arterial walls that are stiffer and more vulnerable than they were decades ago. You understand that every habit on this list either adds to that challenge or subtracts from it. Here is the second question I want you to hold before we reach number 1. Of the thousands of patients who have experienced a cardiovascular event while sleeping, the vast majority of them had been told their blood pressure was under control. They had a number from their last doctor's visit. They had medication. They had a reasonable reading on a standard office monitor. And none of that told them, or their doctors, what was happening at 3 in the morning. None of it told them whether they were a dipper or a non-dipper. None of it revealed the pattern that matters most. There is a specific measurement that would have told them. Most of them never received it. That is what number 1 is about. Before we get there, I want to tell you about a woman named Patricia. Patricia was 69 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio, and she had been managing hypertension for 12 years when she came to see me. She was on 2 blood pressure medications. Her office readings were consistently acceptable, and her cardiologist had expressed satisfaction with her management at her last annual visit. She felt reasonably well, a little tired, some morning headaches, but nothing she had not attributed to age and the general weight of managing a chronic condition. Patricia's husband had been commenting on her snoring for years. She had dismissed it. She was not overweight. She exercised. She did not fit her mental image of someone with a breathing problem during sleep. She told herself it was just the way she slept. When I reviewed Patricia's history and examined the symptoms she had normalized, the morning headaches, the 3 in the morning awakenings, the fatigue that did not respond to sleep, the blood pressure that seemed harder to control than her medications should allow, the pattern was clear. We referred her for a home sleep study. The results showed moderate obstructive sleep apnea, 23 interruptions per hour, each one triggering an adrenaline surge, a blood pressure spike, and a brief but real oxygen drop, 23 times per hour, every single night, for years. When Patricia's apnea was treated, her blood pressure, the blood pressure that had been resistant to 2 medications, became significantly easier to control. Her morning headaches resolved within weeks. Her fatigue began to lift. Her husband reported that the snoring had stopped. And Patricia sat in my office at her 3-month follow-up and said something I have heard many times from patients in her situation. I had no idea any of this was connected. That phrase, I had no idea any of this was connected, is what drives everything I try to explain about overnight cardiovascular health. Because the connections are real, they are documented, and they are rarely explained to the people who most need to understand them. Number 2, unrecognized and untreated sleep apnea. Of everything on this list, sleep apnea may be the single most consequential and chronically underaddressed cardiovascular risk factor in people over 50. And I want to explain it with enough depth that if you recognize any of the signs in yourself or someone you love, you take it seriously, not eventually, soon. Sleep apnea is a condition in which the muscles of the throat and airway partially or completely collapse during sleep, cutting off airflow. This can happen dozens or even hundreds of times per night. And each time it happens, blood oxygen levels drop. Here is the clue that connects everything. Your brain has oxygen sensors that monitor levels constantly, even during sleep. When oxygen falls below a threshold, your brain triggers a survival response, an adrenaline surge, the same hormone that floods your body when you perceive immediate physical danger. Your heart rate accelerates. Your blood pressure spikes, sometimes by 40 to 60 millimeters of mercury. Within seconds, your airway reopens. You take a breath. Oxygen recovers. Within 60 to 90 seconds, it happens again. In moderate sleep apnea, this cycle repeats 15 to 30 times per hour. In severe cases, it can exceed 100 times per hour. Think of what that means physiologically. Your body is triggering a full adrenaline-driven cardiovascular stress response, the equivalent of standing and suddenly being chased while you are lying in bed, while you appear to be sleeping. Repeatedly, every night, for years. The cardiovascular consequences are not subtle, and they are not long-term abstractions. Repeated adrenaline surges chronically elevate blood pressure, not just at night, but persistently around the clock. They accelerate arterial stiffening. They promote the chronic inflammation inside blood vessels that drives plaque development. They make blood significantly more prone to clotting. and they deprive the heart muscle of adequate oxygen during the hours when it is supposed to be recovering. The documented outcomes of untreated sleep apnea include persistent hypertension resistant to standard medication doses, stroke risk elevated 2 to 4 times the baseline, significantly higher rates of atrial fibrillation, and increased incidence of sudden cardiac death during sleep. These are not rare complications. They are the predictable endpoints of a system that has been under nightly adrenaline siege for years. Now you might be thinking, I am not overweight, so this probably does not apply to me. That is one of the most dangerous misconceptions in this area. While excess weight is a risk factor, sleep apnea is fundamentally a structural issue. The anatomy of your jaw, the position of your soft palate, the natural reduction in muscle tone that occurs as we age, all of these contribute independently of body weight. Lean, athletic people develop sleep apnea regularly. Body size is one factor. It is not the determining one. Warning signs that warrant a sleep evaluation. Snoring loud enough to be heard through a closed door. A partner who has observed you stopping breathing during sleep. This is one of the most definitive signs available. Morning headaches across the forehead. A classic marker of overnight oxygen drops. Waking at night, needing to urinate repeatedly. Apnea events trigger a hormonal response that increases urine production. Persistent daytime fatigue despite adequate time in bed. Difficulty concentrating. Unexplained mood irritability. Any consistent combination of these is enough reason to pursue evaluation. Home sleep testing has become accessible and straightforward. You complete the evaluation in your own bed with a small device worn overnight. The results are reviewed by a specialist. Treatment options have improved significantly in the past 5 years. Quieter, lighter, more comfortable than the devices most people remember from a decade ago. For many people over 50, treating sleep apnea may be the single most impactful cardiovascular intervention available. More impactful, in some research, than adding another medication. That is number 2. And here it is, number 1. The most underestimated overnight cardiovascular risk on this entire list. And the reason it is number 1 is not that it is the most dramatic. It is that it is almost universally undetected, even in people who are doing everything else right. Number 1. Unmonitored nighttime blood pressure patterns and the dangerous gap between what your doctor measures and what your cardiovascular system does while you sleep. Let me show you how this clue changes the whole picture. Your blood pressure is not a fixed number. It rises and falls throughout the day, in a rhythm that is predictable and physiologically important. During active waking hours, it runs at its daily operating level. In the morning, between roughly 6 and 10, it climbs toward its daily peak, driven by the cortisol surge, the activation of clotting factors, the transition from sleep to activity. And during the first hours of sleep, in a normally functioning cardiovascular system, blood pressure is supposed to fall, typically by 10 to 20%, compared to daytime levels. This nighttime decline is called the dipping pattern. It gives the arterial walls a daily window of reduced mechanical stress. It reduces wear on the delicate endothelial lining. It gives the heart a genuine period of lower demand. Here is what the research has found, and this is the piece that most people with hypertension have never been told. A significant percentage of people, between 20 and 40% of those with hypertension, and higher proportions among people over 65, people with diabetes, and people with kidney disease do not show this normal dipping pattern. Their blood pressure does not fall meaningfully during sleep. In some people, it actually rises. These individuals are called non-dippers or reverse dippers, and their overnight blood pressure profile is a substantially stronger predictor of heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular death than any single daytime measurement. Now here is the profound and troubling clinical gap this creates. The blood pressure reading your doctor takes is almost always a daytime reading, a morning office appointment. It tells your physician nothing about what your blood pressure does at 2 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, at 6 in the morning during the cortisol surge. A patient can have an entirely acceptable office reading, 128/80, nothing alarming, while their blood pressure at 3 in the morning runs at 155/95, silently damaging arterial walls every single night, week after week, year after year. Because this pattern has never been measured, it has never been treated, the patient believes they are managing their condition. The doctor sees an acceptable daytime number, and the cardiovascular damage accumulates invisibly. Franklin, the patient I told you about at the beginning, turned out to be a non-dipper. His office readings were consistently acceptable, but a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitor revealed a nighttime profile that looked dramatically different. His blood pressure was elevated throughout the night, with no meaningful dip during sleep, and a sharp further rise beginning around 4:30 in the morning. His cardiologist, reviewing that data for the first time, described what they saw as exactly the kind of pattern that tells the whole story. A story that could not be read from any single office reading. With that information, Franklin's treatment was adjusted, medication timing changed, the 7 nighttime habits addressed one by one, and a follow-up monitoring study conducted 6 weeks later. The nighttime profile had shifted meaningfully. His morning headaches had resolved. His 3 in the morning awakenings had become infrequent. He told me, at that follow-up, "I kept thinking I was doing everything right. I just had no idea that nobody had ever measured the part that mattered most." The practical steps I want you to take from this are concrete and achievable. If you have a home blood pressure monitor, and if you do not, an accurate automatic cuff is one of the most valuable health tools available for under $40. Begin taking readings at 2 specific times before bed and immediately upon waking, before getting up, before coffee, before anything else. Keep a 2-week log. Bring that log to your physician. If your morning readings are consistently higher than your evening readings, particularly if they are elevated on mornings when you have slept reasonably well, that pattern is worth a specific conversation. Ask your doctor about ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, a 24-hour recording done with a small portable device that takes readings every 20 to 30 minutes through the day and night. It is the only measurement that can actually reveal your nighttime profile. It is the measurement that turns the hidden story visible. And ask about medication timing, not to change anything on your own, but to have the conversation, whether the timing of blood pressure medication affects its overnight protective effect is an actively researched area of cardiovascular medicine, and it is a conversation your physician is equipped to have with you. You have the right to that conversation. Your overnight blood pressure pattern is part of your cardiovascular health picture. The fact that it is rarely measured in standard care does not mean it is not important. By the evidence, it may be the most predictive single measurement available. That is number 1. Now I want to bring everything together with the concept that connects all 7 habits into a single coherent picture. I call it the compound night effect, and once you understand it, you will never think about these habits in isolation again. We naturally think about health behaviors one at a time. Alcohol is one risk, late dinner is another, dehydration is another. We evaluate each one separately, weigh the inconvenience of changing it against the benefit, and often conclude that no single item seems alarming enough to disrupt something comfortable. That reasoning is understandable. It is also physiologically incomplete. Cardiovascular risk does not add linearly. It compounds. Multiple moderate stressors occurring simultaneously in the same overnight window interact with each other in ways that amplify the combined effect far beyond what any individual factor would produce. The whole is significantly more dangerous than the sum of its parts. Picture a typical Saturday evening. Dinner out at 8, generous portions, higher sodium than a home-cooked meal, wine with dinner, a second glass, a third at home while watching television, bed around 11 after 90 minutes of screen use, a bedroom running slightly warm, phone on the nightstand, mild undiagnosed sleep apnea that has been producing morning headaches for years, but has never been connected to anything specific. By 3 in the morning, this is what is happening inside that person's cardiovascular system. Blood pressure is elevated from the meal sodium and the alcohol rebound. Melatonin is suppressed from the screen exposure, blunting the normal overnight blood pressure dip. Blood is thicker than optimal from the alcohol's diuretic effect and from insufficient plain water through the day. Apnea events are generating adrenaline surges every few minutes, spiking heart rate and blood pressure repeatedly. The warm room has prevented the body from reaching the deep sleep stages where cardiovascular recovery occurs. And by 5 in the morning, the cortisol surge is beginning, raising blood pressure further, activating clotting factors, increasing inflammation and arterial wall vulnerability. None of those stressors alone would necessarily push the system past its limits. Each one individually is manageable. But stacked together, compounding through the night in a cardiovascular system that is already working with stiffer arteries, some degree of accumulated plaque, and a reduced compensatory reserve, that combination can cross a threshold that no single factor would reach on its own. This is the pattern. Not always, not inevitably, but consistently enough to be recognizable. Not one catastrophic mistake. A quiet accumulation of ordinary choices converging in the wrong window at the wrong time. That is the compound night effect. Before the third person I want to tell you about, I want to say something directly, because I am aware that this video covers a great deal of serious ground, and I do not want the cumulative effect to be anxiety. That is not what I am trying to create. You are not fragile. You are not beyond the point where any of this matters. The body's capacity to respond to positive change after 50 is real, substantial, and often faster than people expect. When people begin systematically addressing their overnight conditions, cooling the bedroom, putting the phone in another room, hydrating properly through the day, timing meals and alcohol to allow adequate clearance, getting evaluated for sleep apnea, monitoring their blood pressure at home, and bringing that data to their physician, the changes are noticeable and relatively quick. Within a week, most people sleep more deeply and wake more rested. Within 2 to 3 weeks, morning blood pressure often begins trending lower. Within a month, the chronic low-level fatigue that many people have accepted as the baseline of being in their 60s and 70s starts to lift. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily and clearly. The cardiovascular system is not passive, it is responsive. When you reduce the overnight load it is operating under, it moves back toward balance, with a readiness that consistently surprises people who have been managing their cardiovascular health in the conventional way. I want to close with a story. Margaret was 71, living outside of Denver, Colorado. She had been managing hypertension and a mild arrhythmia for 8 years. She had, in her own words, been a good patient, faithful with her medication, attentive to her diet, diligent about her follow-up appointments. She was not living in denial. She was doing the work, but she had accepted 3 things as simply part of her life with a heart condition. She woke most mornings with a dull headache. She experienced occasional nighttime palpitations that her previous cardiologist had described as benign and age-related. And she felt, in her words, like she was permanently one step behind her own energy. Not sick, just never quite right. When we worked through the 7 habits together, the changes that applied most directly to Margaret's situation were the phone, the bedroom temperature, the timing of her evening glass of wine, and after a home sleep study revealed moderate apnea, the treatment of a condition that had been generating adrenaline surges throughout her nights for years undetected. 8 weeks later, Margaret sat across from me and said something I want you to carry with you from this video. She said, "I kept thinking the tiredness was the disease. I never considered that the disease was being made worse every night by things I hadn't been told about." That sentence is the whole point of everything we covered today. You came into this video with the awareness that something was not quite right during your nights, the awakenings, the headaches, the heaviness that greets you in the morning. Now you have the framework to understand what those signals mean and where they come from. Now you know that the 7 habits we discussed are not abstract health rules. They are specific, documented interventions in the conditions your cardiovascular system faces every night between 10 in the evening and 10 in the morning. Choose one thing today, the one that resonates most clearly with your situation. Start there. Give it 2 weeks of real consistency. Notice what changes in your mornings, in your energy, in your headache pattern, in how your blood pressure log reads before you get out of bed. Then add another. This is not about overhauling everything at once. It is about compounding in the right direction, one change at a time, in the most important physiological window of your day. Your heart has been working for you every second of your life without a single day off. It deserves the best conditions you can give it during the hours that matter most. And you deserve mornings that feel like what Margaret described after 8 weeks of change, Not a fight, not a recovery, just a clean, quiet start to the day. And hey, if you made it all the way here, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button to let me know this was worth your time. And leave a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. Seriously, I read every single one, and it means a lot to see how far this community reaches. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar? Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called the Glucose Paradox, and inside, you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free. You can download it in a second, and it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.